Breaking news! The Browns are buzzing behind the scenes, and one topic in particular has started to generate a lot of buzz among fans and analysts alike. There's been a flurry of trade speculation around the NFL, one involving one of the most talked about tight ends of the last decade. We know we need to build a much stronger roster than last season, and many are questioning general manager Andrew Berry's ability to take the Browns to the next level this year. I have a question for you. How would you rate Andrew Berry? Do you think he's been doing a good job, or has he been lacking? Comment below. And if you really want to see the Browns compete for a Super Bowl, enjoy this one. Okay, let's get right to the hottest tight end. Kyle Pitts? Yes, that Kyle Pitts. The same top 4 pick whose arrival in the NFL was supposed to revolutionize the tight end position. Bleacher Report dropped a bombshell naming the Browns as a potential trade target for Pitts, and Browns Nation is buzzing. But wait, before you start dreaming about Pitts leaping over linebackers in a Browns uniform, let's dig into the real story. Why is that? It may not be what it seems. Bleacher Report's speculative list included 6 teams: the Patriots, Commanders, Rams, Titans, Browns, and Steelers. Of those, only a few make sense as landing spots for Pitts. The Browns? Let's just say that if you're hoping for a blockbuster trade, you might want to temper those expectations. This isn't just about cap space or potential. It's about strategy, fit, and whether such a trade makes sense given Cleveland's current trajectory. First, let's acknowledge the allure. Kyle Pitts, on paper, checks a lot of boxes. He's been a consistent presence on the field and brings versatility. He can line up as a traditional tight end, slide into the slot, and even play wide receiver. He's used in a variety of offensive packages and has been labeled as a focal point of the Falcons' offense. But despite his use, the explosion of production that many expected simply didn't materialize. Pitts didn't live up to the Hall of Fame expectations that followed him from college to the pros. And the situation in Atlanta? Far from ideal for a player like him. Under head coach Raheem Morris, a defensive mind, Pitts hasn't had the offensive support or scheme needed to elevate his game. Contrast that with Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach, who is firmly rooted in offensive strategy, particularly a wide zone run game featuring multiple tight end sets. That's why, on the surface, Pitts could fit Stefanski's mold. He'd slide into a system that values versatility at tight end. But here's where things unravel. The Browns are not short on tight ends. David Njoku is entering a contract year and will be playing with something to prove. Then there's rookie Harold Fannin, whose potential is so electric it's turning heads already. Fannin posted eye-catching numbers in college. Yes, it was Bowling Green, and yes, it was arguably a breakout year. But when we're talking pure upside, Fannin brings as much intrigue as Pitts, if not more, considering trajectory and cost. And this is where the cap space reality hits hard. Cleveland sits near the bottom of the league in available cap space with just $12.4 million. Trading for Pitts means inheriting his 5th-year option and possibly negotiating a new contract, one that could put the Browns in a financial bind. Now consider the proposed trade from Bleacher Report: Kyle Pitts for Greg Newsome. Straight up. That's right, a rare player-for-player swap. It's a concept that feels more Madden franchise mode than real-life football. The logic? Newsome, like Pitts, is on a 5th-year option, and moving him could save the Browns $13.4 million. But here's the flaw. Greg Newsome is a key piece of Cleveland's secondary, and swapping him for a third tight end doesn't address any of the team's actual needs. Tight end is not a concern. Wide receiver? Yes. Quarterback depth? Certainly. But tight end? That room is already crowded and filled with upside. And speaking of fits, don't forget this: Pitts is also looking for a new contract. So is Njoku. Bringing both into the mix would set up a contract year collision course. 2 tight ends, 1 football, and a front office trying to juggle cap flexibility and team chemistry? It doesn't add up. Instead of enhancing the roster, it potentially destabilizes it. If a trade were to make any sense at all, it would have to be for a future 4th-round pick, maybe 2026. That's the only way Pitts could come into Cleveland without disrupting the team's long-term plans or financial structure. But let's be real, that's not happening. Not when the Falcons are thin at tight end, with a depth chart that looks bleak beyond Pitts and Charlie Warner. Why would Atlanta give up their only legitimate option at tight end, especially with Michael Penix Jr. needing reliable targets? The Browns, on the other hand, have depth. They may not have a Travis Kelce or George Kittle, but they have balance and upside. And in this new Tommy Rees-led offense, yes, Rees, the former Notre Dame OC who loves to run the football, the Browns are signaling a return to their roots. That's what drafting backs like Quentin Judkins and Dylan Sampson tells us. This is a ground and pound offense gearing up to control the clock and dominate in the trenches. That means tight ends who can block and contribute situationally, not necessarily a hybrid playmaker like Pitts who comes with cost and questions. But what do you think, Browns fans? Is the idea of Pitts in orange and brown just tempting enough to consider? Or does this whole proposal feel like smoke and mirrors? Now, let's get into the second half of this story, because while the trade might sound crazy on paper, the surrounding narrative reveals even more about where this Browns organization is heading, and why fans should actually feel confident that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski won't be lured into the noise. The idea of trading for Kyle Pitts ignores the strategic direction Cleveland is embracing. Under Stefanski, the Browns' identity has always leaned on a strong running game complemented by tight end usage in blocking and play-action scenarios, not flashy, downfield seam stretchers with elite athleticism but inconsistent production. David Njoku, despite being a former first-round pick himself, had to prove his worth season after season before truly becoming a cornerstone of this offense. His projected stat line for 2025, 70 catches, 850 yards, and 6 touchdowns, represents a realistic expectation in a run-heavy scheme, and most importantly, it's something earned through years of grinding within the Browns system. Adding a player like Pitts would complicate that rhythm, not because Pitts isn't talented, he clearly is, but because his role doesn't naturally fit into Cleveland's current offensive puzzle. Fannin, the rookie tight end, is being groomed for the future. He's explosive, under the radar, and cheap. That matters in today's cap-conscious NFL. When you can develop a talent in-house at a fraction of the cost, especially one who fits your scheme perfectly, you protect your long-term flexibility. Bringing Pitts into the mix would mean putting a handbrake on Fannin's development, and that's not a luxury the Browns should afford themselves just to take a swing on a name that sells jerseys. Speaking of name value, the marketing side of the NFL is often overlooked when fans discuss trade scenarios. Yes, a player like Kyle Pitts brings buzz. He's got highlight reel catches and a recognizable brand. But branding doesn't win games. Chemistry, fit, and execution do. What wins in the AFC North is identity, and the Browns have finally recaptured theirs. Tough, physical, run-first football. You don't sacrifice that to chase a former top 5 pick still trying to find his footing. Let's not forget the quarterback situation either. The Browns still don't have complete clarity at QB. Deshaun Watson remains the presumed starter, but the inconsistency and health concerns haven't gone away. Bringing in another pass catcher who's used to being a primary read, especially when you've got Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman needing touches, adds unnecessary tension to an already complex passing hierarchy. Pitts would need targets to justify his presence. Targets that might not be there, especially in a system trending back toward heavy run usage. Then there's the money. Even if the Browns could structure a creative deal, they'd still be forced to deal with Pitts' 5th-year option and looming extension. This isn't a situation where you're adding a missing piece for a title run. This is committing long-term capital to a player whose production hasn't matched his hype. That's a massive gamble, especially when you're already working with limited financial flexibility. Cleveland is trying to build something sustainable, and part of that means resisting the urge to splash when it doesn't align with the long-term blueprint. And let's zoom out a bit. What's really going on here? Bleacher Report throwing Cleveland into the trade mix feels more like stirring the pot than actual reporting. Why would Atlanta entertain such a deal when their tight end room is basically Pitts and no one? Charlie Warner is the only other name on that depth chart. This is a team trying to give rookie QB Michael Penix Jr. every weapon possible. It makes no sense to deplete their already thin offense just to swap for a corner like Greg Newsome, even if Newsome brings value. If Atlanta's moving Pitts, it would be for serious draft capital or a wide receiver, not another defensive back. Meanwhile, Cleveland's defensive identity is solid. They've got one of the league's best defensive units, anchored by Myles Garrett and a deep secondary. Trading away a starting caliber corner like Newsome destabilizes that strength and doesn't address a weakness in return. Simply put, it's not just a bad trade, it's a misalignment of team philosophy.